It's 2 p.m. on Thursday, November 6th, here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Let's take a look at the stories we are following at this hour. Fears that the nation is walking toward a deflationary trap grow as Korea's consumer price increases are expected to remain in the 1% range for 2 straight years. U.S. President Barack Obama says, "I hear you." That's to the American voters who have handed the Republicans control of both chambers of Congress. And Korea and China start their 14th round of free trade talks. Beijing's Commerce Ministry expresses hope of sealing the deal before next week's summit between President Park Geun-hye and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Now we begin with a North Korean patrol boat that came very close to violating the de facto maritime border with South Korea this morning. The South Korean Navy says the boat was spotted approaching the northern limit line in the West Sea near Yeonpyeongdo Island at around 10:40 a.m. and came within 3 kilometers of the border at one point. Now the boat turned back after South Korea's Navy issued verbal warnings. There were no exchange of fire. Now this comes as naval boats from both Koreas exchanged warning fire near the same area last month after a North Korean patrol boat crossed the maritime border, and there were no casualties reported back then. For the first time ever, Korea's consumer price increase rate has remained in the 1% range for a full 2-year period. This as of the end of October. Now, this is generating fears that the nation could be taking the same deflationary path as its neighbor, Japan. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
There are growing fears about deflation fanned by expectations consumer price increases will remain trapped in the 1% range for the second consecutive year. Statistics Korea says prices rose a mere 1.2% on year in October and were down 0.3% from the previous month. The so-called core inflation rate, which excludes oil and food, edged up 1.8% on year, but that's the slowest increase since February. Prices of agricultural livestock and fisheries products dropped 1.9% on month. At this level, some analysts worry the situation in Korea will reflect what happened in Japan in the early 1990s when Japan found itself in a long-term economic slump.
Unlike Japan in the 1990s, Korea is recording positive growth, but there is certainly a risk of deflation if low consumer prices continue for several years. We expect consumer prices to pick up next year. However, the low price trend will likely continue as global growth measures are focused on the service sector and on consumer products rather than on manufacturing.
The consumer price increase in Korea was lower than Japan's in September by 2 percentage points, the widest margin ever recorded. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The Japanese yen is widely expected to weaken even further against the U.S. dollar next year. Now, analysts at JP Morgan say the dollar will rise to 120 yen from its current level of about 112 by the third quarter of next year, and the same was projected by Credit Suisse and Canada's National Bank Financial as well. The prediction follows the Bank of Japan's surprising announcement last week to expand its monthly asset purchases to boost its economy. Now, the Korean government, meanwhile, is known to be seeking ways to prevent Japan from extending its quantitative easing program through international cooperation. That's something Seoul attempted last year to no avail. The trade ministers of Korea and China are set to lead another round of free trade negotiation talks. Now, there are even reports that an agreement will be announced during a summit between President Park Geun-hye and Chinese leader Xi Jinping next week. Shin Se-min has the details.
Korea and China will meet for a 14th round of FTA talks in Beijing on this Thursday, where they hope to hammer out the final details of their bilateral trade pact. Unlike in previous negotiations where vice ministers attended, Korean Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik and his Chinese counterpart Gao Hu-cheng will be leading these talks. They hope to come to terms on an agreement before President Park Geun-hye and Xi Jinping meet next week during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Beijing. According to Seoul's Trade Ministry, the two sides will be discussing all 22 chapters of the Free Trade Pact, 16 of which have been or are close to being settled. Yet differences remain on the opening China's manufacturing sector to Korean imports and imports of Chinese agricultural produce to Korea. Korean automakers and farmers will be paying close attention to details from the meetings, as both are concerned about their bottom lines being affected by an influx of goods made in China. Free trade negotiations between Seoul and Beijing began in May of 2012. During summit talks in July, President Park Geun-hye and Xi Jinping agreed to conclude the FTA negotiations before the year ends. China is Korea's leading trade partner, with bilateral trade last year reaching nearly $230 billion. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, retail investors are scrambling for early orders to buy stocks of Samsung Group affiliate Samsung SDS. They are especially focused on doing so this afternoon until 3 p.m. Korea time. The public offering of the company is seen as a crucial step for the owner family of Samsung to tighten its control over the group. Kwon So-ah explains.
The subscription competition rate on the second and last day for early investing into Samsung SDS, Samsung Group's IT services affiliate, stood at nearly 60-1 as of 11 a.m. Thursday, and pundits believe competition could exceed 100-1 later in the day. The IT services company's IPO is said to be the largest listing in the second half of this year and is ready to make its debut on Korea Stock Exchange next week. Korea Investment and Securities says a total of nearly 1.2 million shares are up for bidding. The low initial public offering price, set at around $175, is attributed to the fierce competition among retail investors. This, however, has also crushed the hopes of many investors hoping to add the shares to their portfolios.
I'll apply for 200 shares because I don't have a lot of money. If the competition rate is 200-1, that means I have a chance of getting just one share.
The public offer comes amid expectations that Samsung SDS will rise as a key player in the structural changes taking place within Samsung Group ever since Samsung Electronics chairman Geun-hye had a massive heart attack in May. Yi's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong holds more than 11% stake in the company. His sisters Lee Bu-jin and Lee Se-hyun both have nearly 4%. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And shifting gears to politics, with less than a month to review the details of next year's government budget, lawmakers began the process on this Thursday. Now, attention lies on whether they will be able to pass the budget bill by its legal deadline. If so, that will be a first in more than a decade. Our Ji Myung-gil has this report.
At the Parliamentary Budget Committee on Thursday, the $346 billion set aside for next year's budget was divvied up. The government plans to allocate roughly $105 billion for welfare, $53 billion for R&D and social overhead capital, $48 billion for education, $33 billion for defense, $14 billion for safety, $4.6 billion for foreign affairs and unification, and the rest for other social costs. Next year's budget is a 5.7% increase, or $18 billion higher than this year's. Lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party called for expanding the budget to boost Korea's slow economic recovery, while the opposition warned against tax revenue shortfalls that date back to 2012. Opposition party lawmakers also called for cutbacks in unnecessary budgets and for restoring corporate taxes for conglomerates. The two rival parties are trying to reach an agreement on the budget bill before the month ends. According to a parliamentary law revision made last year, if lawmakers fail to reach an agreement on the budget bill, the draft proposal will be automatically submitted to the plenary session on December 1st. Therefore, the two rival parties are expecting a bumpy road ahead as the governing party hopes to pass the budget bill by the legal deadline of December 2nd. While the opposition party lawmakers say a thorough review of the bill should be the first priority. No budget bill has been passed by the legal deadline since 2002. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Delegates in Busan attending the International Telecommunications Union meeting have passed a Korean-led resolution that aims to connect the world via the internet. The so-called Connect 2020 resolution aims to ensure that 55% of the world's households have access to the internet by 2020 while cutting the price of ICT or information communications technology services by 40%. It also plans to foster access and use of ICT and bridge the digital divide. If implemented on schedule, 15% of households from underdeveloped countries will also have access to the net by the target year. In the year 2012, for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. In the U.S., reacting to the Democrats' big loss in the midterm elections, President Barack Obama says he heard the frustration of voters. The Republicans will now have control of both houses, and Obama says he's eager to work with the new Congress. Connie Lee has more.
President Barack Obama had a clear message for the American people, that he's solely focused on working for them.
I'm committed to making sure that I measure ideas not by whether they are from Democrats or Republicans, but whether they work for the American people.
At the White House on Wednesday, it was President Obama's first public appearance since the Republicans scored some great results in the midterm elections. The president vowed to work with Congress, although he stressed his administration's agenda will remain the same. However, he did acknowledge the Democrats' losses, saying it showed Americans want to see an end to the gridlock in Washington.
So to everyone who voted, I want you to know that I hear you. To the two-thirds of voters who chose not to participate in the process yesterday, I hear you too.
The Republicans will officially take control of both chambers of Congress starting in January. And Senator Mitch McConnell, who is set to be the next Senate Majority Leader, also said he was committed to working with the Democrats.
First thing I need to do is to get the Senate back to normal. That means working more. This gridlock and dysfunction can be ended.
The Republicans' strong showing gives them the momentum going into the 2016 presidential elections. However, some believe the GOP still has its work cut out.
It's still yet to be demonstrated that Republicans can do well in a national presidential race when those people vote.
Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And now attention swings away from the midterms and ahead to 2016. That's when Americans will head to the polls to pick their next president. Kim Hyun-bin reports on some of the names that may be on that ballot.
The 2014 midterm elections in the United States have come to close. But already, people are looking ahead to 2016, to presidential elections. Who will run? And what clues might campaigning ahead of the midterms provide? Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who is expected to announce in the coming months whether she'll run, was busy leading up to Election Day, barnstorming around the country to 18 states to lend support to Democratic nominees.
Who's going to be there for you? Who cares about you? Who works for you?
Across the political aisle, possible Republican candidates for president were just as busy. Former presidential candidate Mitt Romney, who says he won't run again, but remains a favorite among his base, made his presence known on the campaign trail.
This is really the last chance for America to pass judgment on the Obama administration and on its policies.
Jeb Bush, the former governor of Florida and brother to former President George W. Bush, is another name being thrown around as a possible Republican Party nominee. So is current New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
When our Republican Party is at its best, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
While the political heavyweights were out promoting other candidates under the banner of their party, it's not a stretch to assume they were also testing the waters for a possible presidential run in 2 years' time. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And in other international news, a Spanish nursing assistant, the first person to contract Ebola outside of West Africa, has been discharged following more than a month of treatment. The 44-year-old had been kept at the Madrid hospital for follow-up care for about 2 weeks after being declared Ebola-free. In a press conference, she expressed her gratitude and said it was memories of her family and her husband that had kept her going. She added she still did not know what exactly led her to catch the disease. Meanwhile, figures from the Africa Governance Initiative show that infection rates in Sierra Leone spiked ninefold to a daily average of 12 new Ebola cases late last month from 1.3 cases seen at the start of September. Russian President Vladimir Putin edged out his American counterpart for the second year in a row to top this year's list of world's most powerful people. Forbes editors made their selections of figures who rule the world based on factors such as scope of impact, financial resources, and use of power. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese leader Xi Jinping rounded out the top three, while Korea's President Park Geun-hye moved up 6 notches from last year, placing at 46th, 3 slots ahead of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Samsung Group Chairman Geun-hye and his son Lee Jae-yong also made a presence at 35th place. Local marine archaeologists have managed to retrieve dozens of pieces of priceless Joseon Dynasty-era porcelain that had laid submerged for at least 200 years at the bottom of Korea's West Sea. Our Park Ji-won has this next story.
This particular area off the coast of Chungcheongnam-do province near the county of Taean is a hotbed for shipwrecks. 4 ancient vessels have been found in these waters since 2007, and another has recently been discovered. Measuring about 11 meters long and 6 meters wide, the sunken ship was carrying over 100 white porcelain wares, along with 2 puncheong, or grayish green powder glazed ceramics, artifacts representative of Korea's Joseon dynasty. Experts believe the pieces date back to the late 18th century to early 19th century.
Seeing where the artifacts were recovered, we now know that the white porcelain was shipped by sea and traded between various regions.
This is the first shipwreck from the Joseon dynasty to be discovered in Korean waters. A dozen ancient shipwrecks found previously dated back to earlier periods, mostly from the Goryeo dynasty, which lasted from the early 10th to late 14th century. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And shifting from the Joseon era to contemporary ceramic arts, our Im Yoon-hee joins us today with the story of a very special artist. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. So she is one of the first and probably the most important early female contemporary ceramic artists to have come from Korea. Now, she's been at her practice for more than 60 years and has been known for taking bold risks with her art. So take a look at this master craftsman.
Submerged in a shower of leaves, caressed by the cool, crisp air, the colors of the wind. It's a window into the rhythm of nature. But here, this window is made from the earth itself. Ceramic artist Hwang Jong-rae molds and shapes the cool clay of Mother Earth into works of art. She's mastered the ability to emulate the fluidity of the natural world and apply it to our everyday life.
Ceramics is a necessary tool in life, both in the past and even in today's world. I took an artistic approach to everyday ceramics, while including elements of today's generation to create these works. They can still be considered a necessary part of life.
These beautiful grounds have inspired Hwang for the past 40 years. It's where she lives, breathes, and works with her ceramics. something that has grown embedded into her life. In every corner, evidence of the art form can be found, making a bold statement or simply accentuating the beauty of nature. Hwang comes from a family of master ceramic artists, and she herself has also become a master, recognized especially for her exceptional use of guyal, the soft brushstrokes found on almost all of her works. It's through these strokes that she captures movement and the fluidity of nature, something she hopes reflects the inspirations she finds in the natural world.
I create 3 layers and then add 3 more for a total of 6 layers. That makes the strokes look continuous and 3-dimensional, resulting in a very lively effect. That's the whole point of guyal, which is what I wanted to explore. Culture is always moving forward, but we have to allow it to create history. And to do so, nowadays younger generation artists are matching today's culture, reflecting the modern world. So like with these works, it's more of a statement piece, something very abstract, which is the direction I think the future is headed in.
Nobody knows for certain what the future may hold, but what is known is what we've seen in the past. Like Hwang shows influences of the traditional depicted in a modern day, several years down the line, the future may show influences of what we see today.
So it looked like she had 2 separate exhibitions,
right,
if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
One at her studio and one at the museum.
So she has some works displayed at her home that are always there, but also she has a very extensive collection at the Gwacheon branch of the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art here in Korea. And that exhibition is called Placid Dynamism, and they have some beautiful works there. It's open till next February. But with this particular exhibition, it's very extensive and covers works from her early career all the way through her more recent works. So Hwang is highly regarded as a first-generation contemporary artist, so her techniques and style were considered quite pioneering at that time. And in a way, this exhibition gives you a look at the history of Korea's contemporary ceramic art, because Hwang herself was such a big contributor and she played such a big role in the development of contemporary ceramic here in Korea.
And you say she also comes from a family with a background of ceramic arts.
Right. So very interesting story there. So her father is a very well-known ceramic master as well. Hwang In-chun, now he's also known for being one of the first to bring back the Koryo celadon, which was very prized at that time. So he devoted his entire life to that. And she also has an older brother, Hwang Jung-gu, who also did work with that as well. He followed in his father's footsteps, but she kind of branched off and took a more modern approach. And so she was telling me when she went to college that at first they didn't offer a ceramics course major, and so she majored in painting, but she went back when they did make it available, and she majored in ceramics later on. So that really proves that she's one of the first female modern, contemporary ceramic artists in Korea, and her whole family really did play a huge influence on Korea's contemporary ceramic art.
Right, it's just really amazing to see. I mean, she appeared to be in her 80s, and she's still very passionate about what she does.
Right, very passionate and still very capable of creating these pieces. She still says she works quite often.
All right, thank you very much, Uni, for today's story.
It was a pleasure.
Good afternoon. The thick clouds from this morning seem to be moving out, and as the day goes on, skies should turn to mostly sunny. And another beautiful autumn day will be featured today. Daytime highs will be similar to yesterday, climbing into upper teens across much of the country. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daytime highs in the capital and Gwangju will top out at 18, while Daegu and Busan will climb up to 20 this afternoon. And on to other regions. Jeju Island and Daejeon will be getting up to 18 later on, and Dokdo will see a high of 15. Well, tomorrow is Ipdong here in Korea, according to the solar calendar, which means the start of winter. And there will be a big drop in temperatures tomorrow morning with Seoul starting off at 5, and the morning lows will remain on the cold side. But that's all for me today. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
And that does it for this edition of our newscast. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.